Promise you, it's not us. Yeah, nobody's like listening to the show and going,
Billy.
I can't take this anymore.
I think we've driven some people to insanity. They might be...
Maybe not have driven them there, but forced them to ask directions. Just saying.
Homelessness, often treated as a single problem, but it often arises due to very different causes, from recently laid off workers sleeping in a car to chronically homeless individuals struggling with addiction or mental illness and might be living on the streets. CSI, Common Sense Institute, has examined the correlations between homelessness rates and multiple factors: housing affordability and homelessness, as well as labor productivity, state spending, drug use, crime, and mental illness. We're going to dive into this with one of the authors of the report. Crime, drugs, rent prices. What is the strongest connection to U.S. homelessness? Dustin Zvonek, Common Sense Institute of Colorado, former city councilman for Aurora, is going to join us. You're not going to want to miss this conversation. Now is time for the news.
Blake Olson.
Blake Olson, news and comment.
Hey, good Thursday morning. It's 19 and sunny in Denver, expecting a high of 39 today. News sponsored by Pastor Camp Heating and Air Conditioning at 303-777-1234 to learn more about special savings opportunities on Lennox equipment. Our top story: DJT's National Institute of Health officially banning taxpayer funding for research that uses aborted baby tissue. Amen. Another positive after 1 year in office.
United States of America, and you don't see the same level of chaos in Minneapolis, the natural conclusion is that it's not what ICE is doing in Minneapolis, it's what Minneapolis authorities are doing to prevent ICE from doing their jobs. And that's exactly what's happening.
VPJD in Ohio this morning. He'll be in Minnesota later to speak at a roundtable about the freak show of paid protesters attacking ICE.
Let me give you just a couple of very real-world examples of some of the problems that we face. So let's say you have a sex offender. We've arrested a number of sex offender illegal aliens in Minneapolis just in the last couple of months. But that person, because they're an illegal alien, we don't know where they live. We don't know their address. If local authorities were cooperating with us, it would be easier to send an ICE agent to the person's house to arrest them, to have local law enforcement protecting our immigration officers. They throw the sex offender in the back of a car, deport that person, throw them in jail, whatever, and then they go home safely to their families. That's not what...
But as we know, that's not happening. And the FBI has arrested 2 of the paid protesters in Minneapolis, 2 of the commies who invaded that church in the city. They've arrested Nakima Levy Armstrong and Chantil Louisa Allen, who allegedly played a role in organizing the freak show, as Don Lemon Fruitcake captured it all.
But there's a reason they have so many white people here. I'm just going to be honest. It's because of the operation that they're doing today. It's important to have allies, as they said, white allies here. So
Bozo.
That is what I could say. I turned our camera off of them because they're giving some critical information here.
Yeah, they're giving critical information like, okay, here's how we're going to storm the church and just invade as worshiping continues in the church, and they go in and ruin it all. All frauds. It's an election year. What do you expect? An economist this morning on Fox Business after 1 year of DJT.
I want to add that we economists were horribly wrong on the strength of the economy, especially in the second half of 2025. You know, many were looking for growth no faster than 1.5%. You point out 4.3% growth in the third quarter. We want to also consider the fact that real consumer spending at 3.5% was far better than what you would expect given this very sluggish pace of jobs creation. Very low jobless claims. That tells us companies may not be hiring, but they are not firing.
Third quarter final read, 4.4%. And as you heard The economists, most of them, the majority of them, were wrong. The WEF wrapping up. DJT's new board of peace is official. He's worked out a great deal with Greenland that will be beneficial for everyone involved, Greenland, the U.S., and the free world. And then 47 made his mark again and set the tone for the rest of the world. And he's still going to have a meeting with little guy Zelensky to talk about the war that evidently Zelensky doesn't want to end. Here's the president.
So I meet with Ukraine, as you know, today. I meet with the president, and we'll be discussing it. We're meeting with President Putin today or tomorrow. And some people are going over. And I think they're getting close. A lot of people are being killed. We got to get it done.
It's been a big week for the president and his administration in Davos. A shelter-in-place order in Erie has been lifted in the areas of Eagle View Place and Vale Way. Erie police were looking for a hit-and-run suspect who was on foot and put the order out, but now it looks like they have it under control if you are in the area. Broncos with a vital practice today in preparation for Sunday's AFC Championship game against the Patriots at 1 o'clock on Sunday. Bo Nix speaks for the first time via social media after his surgery, says he has confidence in Jarrett Stidham, and Stiddy is ready for the challenge.
This is not about myself. First of all, I want to, obviously my thoughts and prayers have been with Bo since Saturday night. I mean, it's crushing because he's one of my best friends, and Sam and I were talking about this. Like, Sam and I probably spend more time with him than his wife does right now, and that's just the nature of the business that we're in. My heart goes out to him, and everything that he means to this team, because obviously we wouldn't be in this position without Bo. And I just want to go. I know all of us on offense, and I know the whole team. We want to go out there and make them proud. This Sunday.
We'll see what happens. Avalanche on the ice against the Anaheim Ducks last night. It goes to an overtime shootout. Talk about exciting. The Ducks win it, though, 2-1. 17 in Parker, 18 in Arvada, 19 in Denver. You're waking up with Jeff and Bill on a Thursday. Blake Olson, News Talk 710 KNUS.
The Arctic Express is going to graze the Front Range and Eastern Plains of Colorado here late this week and over the weekend. Be prepared for some winter temperatures, but not for today. We're going to be mid to upper 40s, upper 30s tomorrow, and teens tonight. The cold air begins to leak in Thursday night. Much colder. Lows 5 to 10 with areas of flurries. Very cold Friday, cold northeast winds, highs only teens with some areas of light snow. Some areas of light snow, lows near 0 Friday night, highs Saturday only teens with areas of light snow. Meteorologist Don Day in the 710 KNUS Weather Center.
Crime, drugs, rent prices. What is the strongest connection to U.S. homelessness? New report out from our friends at the Common Sense Institute of Colorado, a nonpartisan think tank. Just the facts, ma'am type of organization has dove into this, and joining us to give us insight on this report is the homelessness fellow, Dustin Zvonek. He's not a homeless fellow.
Well, I hope they at least give him an office.
He's just the homelessness fellow.
Yeah. I thought it was just an excuse that they could cut back on the office space.
Right. Dustin, glad to have you with us. Give us some insight. What did you guys learn in your latest report?
Hey, thanks for having me. This report comes on the heels of the last report CSI did, where they looked at the different policy prescriptions that states and local governments use to address homelessness. And one of the things that they heard as they were going through on that study, and then we often heard, I heard on city council from homelessness advocates, was that, it's really the primary driver. It's the cost of living. It's the cost of housing. It's the cost of rent. And that's why I think you see a lot of the housing first advocates talk about the need to make available more housing in order to address homelessness. But what CSI's study shows is that, in fact, things like mental health challenges, illicit drug use, those are factors that actually contribute more to homelessness than does the cost of rent or the cost of getting into any sort of housing. And that is not what the Housing First advocates want to hear, because their policy is, hey, if we put people into housing, we're going to solve homelessness. And the fact is that isn't the case, because it isn't being driven by a single thing, and the cost of housing by itself is not the primary driver of homelessness.
That's Dustin Zvonek with Common Sense Institute, Colorado. Dustin, homelessness is something I care deeply about, spent time in grad school studying it. And there's been a progression, and people don't understand this progression. And I think it helps frame what's actually happened here. Because in the 50s and 60s, if you experienced homelessness, it was generally understood to be temporary. You would show up at a homeless shelter, and it was what was called a hot and a cot, a hot shower, hot meal, and a cot to sleep on. Yeah. And you were expected to go out the next morning and work, and people generally were okay with that. I worked in what I would call the homelessness industrial complex in LA for a bit, where you had entire systems set up to care for people. So you think about the change from the 1950s to when I was in grad school, mid-2000s, you could show up at a homeless shelter and they'd give you a suit, phone number that you could lay out for our job applications. You could live there, eat there. They had workforce training. They had attorneys there. They had health care there. It was like a whole mall set up to help people with homelessness. And yet the homelessness rate just continued. So it wasn't necessarily a lack of services. You had people that had deeper systemic issues. And that seems to be what your report confirms. Your thoughts, sir?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I think this is why, again, there's a debate, especially here in Colorado, because we, as you guys recall, when I was on City Council in Aurora, we wanted to push for what is referred to as work first or treatment first programs, and to show a contrast to what Denver has continued to do, and that's housing first. And the biggest difference is that first initial entry into a homeless shelter is exactly what you described, the hot and a cot, except they try not to give you a warm meal because they don't want you to get too comfortable with it, but it's some sort of a meal and a cot. That's available whether it's work and treatment first or housing first. But the difference is that with housing first, they'll say, we just need to get people housed, we need to get them into shelter, and yeah, we're going to have all of these services, everything that you just described, that they're available. Now, whether or not you participate, that's irrelevant. It's just that we have wraparound services that are available. The idea behind work first or treatment first is that if you want to continue to be able to stay in this transitional housing, you have to participate in these types. It's a way to compel with a carrot approach, since our country's legal structure doesn't allow us to compel people with addiction problems or with mental health issues to participate in services. But this is a way, with the work first or treatment first type of approaches, if you want to continue to stay here, if you want that warm meal, if you want to continue to have, a place to stay that's not just a cot, you have to and continually progress through a treatment plan where there is a path towards self-sufficiency. Now, everybody's path is going to look a little bit different, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, or a year. It's going to look different, but you have to continue on it in order to continue that transitional housing. Housing first advocates don't love that because they just want to put it all back onto, if we get people housed, we solved homelessness. And that's not. As I often refer to Mayor Johnston's plan in Denver as just hiding the homeless. What he wanted to do is he wanted the business leaders in downtown Denver to not complain to him anymore about seeing homelessness on the 16th Street Mall. Okay, mission accomplished, but it doesn't solve the root cause of why those people are there and what they're still doing in those, hotel rooms.
What I would often call the hotels from hell, because you'd see the number of 911 calls going to these places, and it was wild. We're talking with Dustin Zvonek, Common Sense Institute, new report out regarding housing, homelessness, drug use, mental health. Here's the bottom line. This analysis finds that while housing affordability correlates with homelessness rates, that's just basic economics, other factors show equal or stronger correlation, including illicit substance use rates, labor productivity, and state spending levels. Dustin, you do a great job in this report diving into all the different states. I mean, you provide analysis of major cities and states. What did you learn about the different states, how they're addressing homelessness, and do policy prescriptions either reduce homelessness or make it worse?
Yeah, so the great question, and the answer is that, I think one of the biggest challenges that states and local governments have under the current structure is that the federal government, going back to the early 2000s, this is actually tens, when Obama was president, the federal government changed the policy preference of the federal government to be housing first. And so what that has done is it's taken programs like Step Denver and others where they compel their participants to participate in services, to participate in whether it's addiction and recovery type of services or mental health services. They're no longer or have not been eligible for any sort of federal funding on the programmatic side. President Trump this year, actually, we were grateful and happy to see that he signed an executive order that said, hey, look, we need to fund treatment first, work first type programs because those are going to be the programs that are most successful. So as we looked around the country, one of the things that we saw was that the states and cities that were dumping the most money into the housing first type of programs, they weren't having any better outcomes. Where what we did find, and this goes back to the first report, is that you can find instances of cities within cities where there are specific programs that were using treatment first, were using work first. They were having success. But again, they were having challenges of trying to really supercharge those programs because they couldn't get access to any of the funding that was coming through HUD. They were purely relying on private and foundation support, which limited the number of people that they could serve, but they were having success. And so, one of the things that I've advocated for, and I think that the studies, both of the studies that CSI has done reinforces, is the need for the federal government to say exactly what President Trump did in his executive order, and we need Congress to codify it, and that is, hey, let's let states and local governments be laboratories of democracy. Let's allow them to try different programs that are going to move people from homelessness to self-sufficiency. Jeff, you talked about the difference between homelessness now and maybe go back to the 50s and 60s. One of the other challenges that's unique now is how do you deal with the population of people who have such severe mental health issues that they're never going to be self-sufficient. They don't have family that can support them. At that point in time in our country's history, we had institutions. And I'm not suggesting we go back to institutions, but there needs to be some sort of programs for those individuals because they're the ones that are the most visibly homeless. They're the ones that end up on our street or in our jails, and there's no way to compel them to participate in programs, even though we need them off the street more than anybody.
Well, and I am an advocate of bringing back the institutions because what happened when they shut them down is they basically adopted this model of community care. That was the language they used. It was like, well, these institutions are clearly abusive. Let's allow for community care, which just meant it's like who watches the 3-year-olds at a birthday party? Nobody really does because you have nobody has direct responsibility, right? It's like community care. Well, they're all over the place. No one takes direct responsibility for caring for them, and so it can be a little chaotic. And that's what you have where people are living, and I don't see it as compassionate. People living drug addicted in tents, and we're somehow going, well, it's community care. No, it's horrible that we've decided to allow that. I'll give you the ability to respond to that, Dustin.
Yeah, no, that's right. I don't disagree. I think that the way you think about the way that we have, care set up for seniors, and there are ways that you could structure a care system where there is accountability and responsibility for those individuals who don't have family and frankly will never be capable of being independent, and it can be. You don't have to call it an institution, but it can essentially function the same way where it's like this is where these individuals go, and it is more compassionate. It gets them off the streets. It helps them lead a sober life. It helps them lead a more fulfilling life than what they're experiencing on the sides of our roads or, on the sides of our highways.
That's Dustin Zvonek, Common Sense Institute of Colorado. New report out titled Crime, Drugs, Rent Prices. What's the strongest connection to U.S. homelessness? Here's, guys, my synopsis of it. And Bill, I'll throw it to you if you have any comments or thoughts on this.
Yeah.
Obviously, people that are homeless don't have a home. It's like the definition. So the Housing First said, well, just give them a home. Now they are not homeless, and we've solved the problem. And I think what we've learned in this report, and has been my experience and what I saw with Mayor Mike Kaufman when he went out and lived among the homeless for a bit to see what it was like, is that homelessness is in itself a symptom of something that could be much larger, much deeper. So when you just hand somebody with a deeper problem a home, you don't actually solve homelessness, because homelessness is a symptom of something deeper. Bill, that's what's coming to me in this report. What do you think?
Yeah, the thing that jumped out at me, and we're talking with Dustin Zvonek from Common Sense Institute. He is the homeless fellow there, which doesn't mean that they make him sleep in a tent out in the parking lot. He actually does have an office, so that's nice of them. All right, so Dustin, one of the things that I'm hearing based on the analysis here is that one of the problems that we are having in combating homelessness is that we are searching for a singular cause. And what I mean by that is those individuals that argue for housing first seem to operate under the premise that if we give them shelter, everything else that led up to homelessness will be fixed. There's not a lot of support on the back end. Do you think that one of the reasons that Colorado, but also universally across the country, that we have such a problem dealing with homelessness is we keep searching for that singular cause?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that it's seen very clearly in the federal government's preference for housing first. Right? I mean, that's a policy that essentially does exactly what you just described. It's like, let's get everybody housed. And services are available, but whether or not, the individuals who we've put into housing ever participate in those services is irrelevant. There's never an expectation or a requirement for it, because they believe that they've solved the problem with the housing and all the other stuff. It's more just for show for them to say, hey, we have wraparound services available. But what the report clearly highlights, and Jeff, you're exactly right, that being homeless is a result of other things, right? And they're not addressing the other things by just housing them. So whether it's tough economic conditions, if somebody loses their job, those are the people who are not going to see on the sides of the roads as much. They're going to be the people who are sleeping in their cars or at shelters or couch surfing. But people who fall on tough economic times, are we actually providing job services? Are we doing the things that you said, helping people, have a suit and get their resume ready and apply for jobs? And then with the two issues that Common Sense Institute identified as really leading drivers, that addiction challenges with illicit drugs and mental health issues. Are we actually requiring people or doing things that are helping them to get the services necessary to address those issues? Because if they address those issues, that is going to be their path back toward self-sufficiency, towards being housed on their own, whether it be in affordable housing or market-rate rent. Just putting them into a building or a room is not going to address their underlying problems.
That's Dustin Zvonek from the Common Sense Institute, and there is a phrase you used in your answer right there, Dustin, that I really want to highlight for our audience, and it is the phrase, wraparound services are available. I think that is a very, very important point to make, because many, as you outlined, many of these housing first programs then say, and we have other wraparound services that are available. The important word to pay attention to there is available, not mandatory. We've been down at Step Denver. Peter's been down at Step Denver. Everybody that is a longtime KNUS listener understands how important Step Denver is and how effective they are. They do not have wraparound services that are available. They have mandatory programs that you need to participate in order to continue to be part of Step Denver. When they give you a meal and a cot, it's not a suggestion that you go to group therapy. It's not that sobriety is available to you. It's not that employment is a possibility. They are requirements to continue in the program. You leave Step Denver, you go out and get drunk or high and show back up at the door, you're kicked to the curb. There's no incentive for anyone that is in a Housing First program that has wraparound services available to avail themselves of that service. And this is anecdotal, but it proves the point. There is a former Denver talk show host whose name, if I mentioned, everybody would recognize listening to the show. He was around for quite a while. He had a brother that struggled with addiction. He was a just raging alcoholic and would disappear homeless for weeks, if not months at a time. Sometime the only time this talk show host would hear about where his brother was is when the hospital called him to tell him that your brother's in here getting a toe removed or something else because he was out in the middle of the winter. And I remember talking to this talk show host when he said, yeah, my brother has a house. He got into this program, etc. And then he paused and said, but it's not going to work. I'm like, what do you mean? And he said, the reason my brother was so excited about it is they didn't require him to be sober. They gave him a house and he didn't have to be sober. What do we all think that happened? Of course, he kept drinking. Did he go to work? Did he get employed? No. He continued to have the same problems he had before, only now he had an actual toilet that he considered his own that he could come home and puke in. That was it. It didn't make him better. It didn't solve his problem. And functionally, didn't really change anything to make him not homeless, other than the fact that a program was supporting him, using some taxpayer money. That's the thing that Dustin Zvonek said that was most important there. When wraparound services are available, they're many times going to be ineffective. It has to be mandatory or they're not going to follow it. That's the problem. You can't search for a singular cause and say, once we give them a home and provide other available services, that we expect the problem is going to change. The house just didn't disappear overnight. There were steps that led to that. We need to correct those steps, whatever that is. Is it employment? Is it productivity? Is it a mental health issue? Those things need to be treated, or you can't expect them to have a different outcome.
How much of this, Dustin Zvonek, do you attribute to kind of the what I call the homelessness industrial complex, where we're essentially just providing jobs for people to work in the homelessness industry, as opposed to like actually incentivize them to help other people? Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I've used that that term, homeless industrial complex, often because and usually you can tell the programs that that fall into that category. Typically, they will give you vanity metrics, right? They'll tell you the number of hot meals they've served every year and the number of beds they've made available on cold nights. But you ask them, how many people have you helped move from being homeless for whatever reason that they're homeless, whether it's economic issues, mental health issues, addiction issues? How many people have you helped move from being homeless to becoming self-sufficient? And that is not a number they track. And the mission statement of any homeless organization should be to go out of business, right? Like that should be their purpose, is that they should strive to no longer be in existence. But that's not the case because of the homeless industrial complex. There are many who view this as a problem that if all you're doing is providing meals and cots, you're never going to be out of work, because that's not going to solve the problem. You're going to continue to be able to raise money from donors into your 501c3 because you're doing, work to help the homeless community, when in fact you're not actually helping the homeless community in any real way. Maybe in the moment, but you're not changing anybody's lives.
Dustin Zvonek out with a great report, Crime, Drugs, Rent Prices. What is the strongest connection to U.S. homelessness, go to commonsenseinstituteus.org, commonsenseinstituteus.org, to check out his report. This is a fantastic organization doing nonpartisan research work. Just the facts, ma'am. Getting out there to help us make better decisions as a community. I do want to ask you before we depart here, Dustin, you sat on the Aurora City Council. I'm sure you're well aware of the news of Rob Andrews and his DUI, at least 3 times the legal limit. I want to give you an option to talk about the direction of the Aurora City Council. Do you think Rob Andrews needs to resign?
That's up to Rob. I feel bad for the guy. I do. Every one of us is prone to having low moments in life and making a mistake. And clearly this is one I'm sure that he wishes he could take back. I think being, the chair of public safety is going to put a lot of scrutiny on him. But, I wish him and his family the best. I know it's tough to fall into these tough times, especially when you're in the public spotlight. So, what he decides to do next is up to him. But I know that none of us want to be judged by our lowest moment. I'm sure that he would include this as one of his.
What do you think about the direction of Aurora? The city council's turned over. You were part of the conservative leadership of it. What's your anticipation of how Aurora is going to look under its progressive leadership now?
I do worry, Jeff. I worry. I mean, I think there's so much work that was done over the last 4 years that really moved the city in a positive direction. Everything from the approach that the city takes to homelessness, which is a work first or treatment first philosophy, to even some of the the measures that we took to reduce crime. And you're seeing the reduction, whether it's motor vehicle theft and retail theft. You're seeing those things work, and the idea that they could just be unwound for ideological reasons as opposed to them not working or being failed policies, it concerns me. I still live in the city. My kids are growing up there, and I hope the best for it. But I worry that the direction of the city could look a lot different given the composition of the new council.
He's one of the most talented thinkers out there. Great report with Common Sense Institute. That's Dustin Zvonek. You can follow him on X at x.com/Dustin Zvonek. Last name spelled Zvonek. You can also keep up with his great triathlete competitions. He's probably the fittest political thinker out there as well in Colorado.
I watch those videos and I pull a muscle myself. It's just awful.
Right.
It hurts me.
Dustin, we sure appreciate your time today. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I would love to hear from you. What are your thoughts on this? Is it time for America to kind of change its perspective on homelessness? That the constant money into the housing first with available wraparound services, is it really helping people? Or are we just throwing money into the homeless industrial complex and we're not really contributing to actually caring for people? It's just a convenient way to kind of, hide them. And we feel better about ourselves, but it's not actually really addressing the problem. Give us a call. Join the conversation, 303-696-1971. Text us on the Dan Keplis Law text line at 720-819-5115. We'll continue. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710, KNUS.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show, talking with Dustin Zvonek, Common Sense Institute, about crime, drugs, rent prices. What is the strongest connection to U.S. homelessness? They go through, you should absolutely go to see this report, commonsenseinstituteus.org, because they look at the correlations and they track them. Correlations between homelessness and the rate of illicit substance use, hours of labor required to pay rent, and then break down the homelessness rates in these different states. I mean, it is a very impressive report because we have text messages. They're hot on this one. Your guest is a closed-minded conservative. I'm an open-minded evangelical. What's so bad about SSD, which is Social Security disability payments, and SSI that provide income to disabled people? I don't think that's what people are concerned about. If you're severely disabled, unable to work, and you're not drug addicted, and you're not alcohol addicted, and you're doing your best, Americans aren't going to be out there advocating that you get cut off. But what we have here, guys, is billions of dollars being spent on the homelessness. In California, I don't know if you've seen these videos of Gavin Newsom talking about, and it's that same term, wraparound services. We provide wraparound services. We provide housing. But the problem is, guys, we're getting to the spot where we're taking money from Americans that are struggling to get by, struggling to afford all that stuff, and putting it into a system that doesn't purport to actually solve the thing it seeks to do. It is not actually alleviating poverty. It's just maintaining it. And I've seen this statistic before from the Heritage Foundation that since we decided to declare war on poverty, we've spent more money addressing the war on poverty with social services than all the wars combined. And the poverty rate is the same. So even if you claim to be an open-minded, compassionate evangelical, you have to admit that all it's done is create a system of dependency for folks, where we're pouring money from hardworking people into a system that doesn't actually solve homelessness. Bill, your thoughts?
Yeah, the thing is, I agree with you on the idea of the wraparound services. I disagree with you a little bit on the idea of the war on poverty, but that's a larger economic discussion and goes back into some of the BS that Howard Lutnick floated at Davos recently, as far as the breakdown of economies, both in the U.S. and what has happened in the last couple of decades and across Europe. But putting that aside, because it's not necessarily germane to the debate that we're talking about, that with the homelessness crisis, the idea when Newsom says, and as Zvonek pointed out, that the wraparound services are available, it doesn't mean that they're mandatory. And it has been shown that it is difficult to get people that are in addiction cycles or having mental health crises, or both, to get through those systems unless they become mandatory. Because when you are in the middle of that mental health crisis, oftentimes you don't feel that you are. And giving you the choice to go and talk to the counselor isn't as effective as making the counseling mandatory. The same thing with sobriety. If these people that are homeless, and one of the issues that they struggle with is sobriety, I'm certain that everybody listening to the Jeff and Bill Show has known someone, either in your family or a social circle, that has struggled with sobriety and that talks about coming out on the other end, and how even then, day by day, it's hard. So hard. Just had a guy that plays bass in a mid-level band that tours around the U.S. Celebrating just yesterday his 14th year of sobriety. and talked about how hard it is on a daily basis.
It's wild how hard it is.
It is.
I'm surprised anybody gets out of it.
Me too. And so the idea that we are going to say these people that are in the midst of addiction and they're going to break it based on service availability rather than if they've gotten to a point where the addiction has contributed to them not having a home or gainful employment, there needs to be something mandatory. We had people sitting right here a couple of weeks ago in this studio from Step Denver talking about how they had absolutely productive lives, good paying jobs.
Yes.
One that was blue collar, one that was white collar. Both really good paying jobs. And those fell apart because of the addiction. They had all the availability. They had all the services they could go to, and it didn't work. There's one guy here. How many of those rinse and repeat places did he go to that are just want to wash out after a week? Yeah. He said it was like 12 or 13 that he had been to, and they all failed him. So it wasn't as if he didn't know the service was available. Part of it was it wasn't mandatory for him to be able to continue his lifestyle.
You guys know I'm big on trying to understand the addiction crisis we're facing in America, and so much of it stems from what the pharmaceutical companies did with opioids.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, when you dive into go read the book Dreamland or The Least of Us by the same author. When you get deep into what the Sackler family did, Purdue Pharma and all that stuff, how much they incentivize their sales teams and the doctors to go get Americans addicted to these drugs. And then America rightfully stepped in and stopped it. But the addiction didn't go away. And when you understand dopamine addiction around not just methamphetamines, but fentanyl and the other opioids, the idea that anybody gets out of that, like what that does to your brain, the idea that anybody gets out of that is amazing to me. Okay? So that's what we're trying to say here. The homelessness issue is a drug and mental health issue. It is not a financial issue. Although finances is a component of it, it is not just a lack of finances. It's not just a universal basic income. If they just had more money, this thing would solve itself. We are dealing with a drug addiction mental health issue. Mike Kaufman, the mayor of Aurora, went out there and lived as a homeless man, came back and said, that's what this is. And we enable it. So the housing first, wraparound services approach is not working. Start treating it like a drug addiction mental health issue. And I will tell you, sure as hell, not going to work. Needle injection sites. All right, we'll continue. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710, KNUS.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. Text messages hot as we wrap up the show here. In terms of wraparound care for the homeless being checkered, text in. We already know the adage this violates. Give a man a fish, feed him a day, teach a man to fish. The problem is we are apparently more inclined to spend money on the homeless than we spend time with them. That's incredibly sad, but clearly true.
That's an interesting insight, the idea that we want to spend more on them than time with them. I think maybe intentional, maybe not being checkered, but I think that is very insightful because having wraparound services is spending money on them because the services are available. Making the services mandatory and making sure those men and women show up in sobriety meetings and therapy meetings and counseling meetings like they do at Step Denver, that takes personal time and effort and commitment.
Personal accountability in 2026, Bill. That's a 4-letter word, man.
And right in time for the close music. Yes.
Well, we appreciate everybody joining the conversation. We will be back tomorrow at the same time, 6 to 10 a.m. Go to 710knus.com to download the podcast. We'll be talking about Jack Smith tomorrow. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is 710 KNUS. Almost Friday.